on the various license types, I did include the breakdown of all the license fees. So if you're there for that, I can tell you for certain then. But you can also find it right online through the state's regulations. It's listed right in there. But they're in the PowerPoint as well.
So I had a question about sort of specific to attorneys and sort of that process that we're all going to have to go through as entrepreneurs in getting an attorney. Actually, I have 3 questions pertaining to that. So is it better to, so one of the slides you had up, it showed like real estate attorney and so forth, different types of attorneys. Is it better to pair yourself with like a one-stop shop attorney, or to have multiple different attorneys to handle different things?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, it depends on how best you work, I would say. And, you don't always need all of those attorneys all the time. You need them for the various stages that you're going through. So you may need your corporate guy right at the very beginning to help you form your partnership between you and your 3 partners. But you may not need anyone to do real estate until you find your location. You won't need anyone to do the land use process until you know which license you're going for and in what community, and have to start working with the municipality. And you don't really need a regulatory attorney until you're ready to start applying for your licensing applications. So there are plenty of firms out there that offer all of that under one umbrella. Shameless plug, Prince Lobel is one of those, and we would love it if you came and did all of your services with us. But there's a lot of good lawyers out there now. At the beginning, 7 years ago, there were only a few firms that were really working on cannabis. But now there's many more. So you can find smaller offices, more competitive rates. So it's really about, what your needs are at the time and how you work well. I mean, if you think you'll be better served by going to one firm, so you have one point of contact and they're going to help you through everything, a lot of people like that. Others, no, I have a guy that I like for real estate, I have a guy that I like for corporate. So it's, it's personal preference as much as anything, and cost.
Yeah, and I would just say that, Dan is unique in that he has expertise in a lot of these areas. So often you won't find somebody who is, on the regulatory side as adept as somebody on the licensing side. He just happens to be amazing.
Thank you.
I will say, as far as the real estate goes, if you are looking at a specific location, it is often you can find an attorney that is value add who will do more than just your LOI and agreements, but actually knows the area, knows some of the people in the community, can kind of assist in that way, and just your affiliation with that person can help you gain, move through the community process because people know who that is. So value add in sort of all these relationships is something to look for.
Perry's hired a lot of attorneys. Any thoughts there, Perry?
Well, for me, I appreciate being able to go one place for all services, and then that also means that one party is accountable if something should go wrong, and that one party has an understanding of everything and how it fits together. So there's value, but it's really personal preference.
Thank you. My second question, you mentioned cost, which is a good segue to my second question. So in interviewing different firms, I've noticed that some will give you sort of like just like a wholesale price. It's going to cost you this much to go with us to get you through the licensing process, whereas others will charge hourly. What's a better way for an entrepreneur to go?
That's a great question, and another tough one. We operate on an hourly basis. We don't do flat rate work. We also don't do monthly retainer work. Plenty of groups out there do. I don't know that I have a great answer for you. It's a difficult question because monthly retainer work, if it goes longer than you thought, could end up costing you more than the hourly work. The hourly work may, depending on what the rate is, may be higher than if you're monthly retainer guy can get it done really fast. So, you know, you kind of have to factor in who it is, what their price is. I mean, everyone should be able to give you at least a range, even if it's an hourly rate, of what they anticipate a particular project is going to cost once they know the specifics about the project. And, you know, my advice would be just to shop around, and you can, you know, most firms will take an initial phone call or meeting for you to interview them and get to know them and hear about their pricing. And so if you talk to 5 different firms, you'll get a pretty good sense of where you think you want to land.
Yeah. And you know that we have a relationship with Prince LaBelle, so we are paying on an hourly basis. Having interfaced with lawyers for a long period of time, I think I can say that we don't like retainer-based fee arrangements because there are points in time when you may not use that advice, you know, where you don't make those calls and incur that hourly service. So personally, I think that trying to move towards a project-based fee or paying hopefully a discounted hourly rate makes most sense. And know also that when you have those conversations with potential lawyers that you're thinking about working with, you can try to negotiate. So although they may say our fee is $445 an hour or whatever it is, you can explain your situation, and there's some instances where law firms do decide to take on clients and that don't pay the full rate.
Another shameless plug for Prince LaBelle. We do have a discount for equity applicants, social equity applicants. So please give me a call.
Negotiate from there too.
No comment.
I just want to say one quick thing. If you are not accustomed to dealing with attorneys, I, in another life, was an attorney. I'm still an attorney, I guess. It never goes away, does it?
Only if you want it.
But I practice in a lot of different areas, and one thing you can really be disciplined about to help you is when you are speaking to your attorney, have a very specific list of things you want to speak about, accomplish those things, and then get off the phone. I used to tell people all the time who would call me during like divorce litigation and all this stuff, like, I'm happy to sit here and listen to you, but you should call your sister or someone else because this is expensive. So just be careful. If you're frustrated, vent with someone first, and then be specific with your attorney.
And then also know that typically law firms bill in 15-minute increments. So if you call with a question that takes 2 minutes and you're off the phone, you're billed for 15. So maybe build in a couple more questions.
We're 6-minute increments, so tenth of an hour.
All right, last question. I promise I'll give up the mic. So in terms of, I just lost my train of thought here. Oh yes, so really specific question. At what point should you get the attorney involved in your fundraise? Let's say you're in like a seed round, and you're just doing like, you know, friends and family at that point. Is that a good point to get them? I mean, obviously, if you're like talking to a VC or something like that, you want your attorney on your side. But you know, if you're just dealing with like friends and family, do you really need to start incurring the cost of? Okay, I see.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, especially for raising capital. You know, I'm not a securities lawyer by trade, but I've been around enough deals that I know that securities laws are very stringent about how you raise money, who you raise money from, what the rules are around that, and the term friends and family is a little bit of a misnomer. So, you know, from a securities law perspective, if you are taking money from outside investors, you definitely want to, you know, at least spend a couple hours on a consult with an attorney, and it's worth the you know, couple $100 for a few hours of their time to analyze your situation and give you some initial advice, and then you'll take it from there based on what your needs are. But early on, you know, selfishly, I say early on anything, whether that's a real estate negotiation or a land use process or, you know, a capital raise situation. But earlier the better, from my perspective.
And I'd add that it's also really important that you have your documents in place before you accept money, even from your parents. Because oftentimes, when things go wrong, it can cause tension in relationships, and having something that's documented, we talked about this, if you don't remember, refer to the agreement, can be really helpful. So in order to raise money, we used what's called a subscription agreement and an operating agreement. So the operating agreement just explains how everything's going to be done in the company, like how many people or what percentage of the investors need to vote if you want to sell or if you want to acquire something. It lists everyone's interest in terms of percentage, and those agreements are really key to protect you in the long run.
Yeah, and I would just say, I think when Dan said, like, selfishly get us involved early, it's not so much about fees as it's very frustrating to go into a process that's started already, because then you're untangling a bunch of things, and it ultimately, I think, will cost you more money in the long run to unravel what has been done. So if you get them involved early, it's easier.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've been involved in a scenario where someone we don't get involved until there is an issue. Everyone is, kumbaya until you need more money, or something goes drastically wrong and the landlord pulls the property out from under you, or something like that. And now we, as the attorneys, are looking back at everything you did, and we've got to review everything, and it can be, more work for us to sort of get up to speed to where you are currently than it would have been if we'd coached you through the entire way. But good questions all around.
Is it legal for an attorney to take ownership into a company or percentage of the profit in lieu of the fee?
Contingent fee arrangements aren't illegal per se, but there can be a conflict of interest. Depends on what the scenario is. So there's more factors than that, but there are plenty of attorneys out there that will reduce their rates in exchange for some equity in the business or otherwise. But plenty will just work for you on an hourly fee basis, and most entrepreneurs would prefer to keep their cap table tight and not give away equity if they don't have to.
And I'd say if you decide that you want to enter into an arrangement like that, make sure you have a clear understanding of what that attorney will do for you in exchange for that equity.
Yeah, agreed.
And that they are capable of doing what they say they can.
I have some some of these we might have already answered. Please explain how many inspections we can expect from the CCC, from PPLI to PFLI to commence operations.
I guess I can start, and then Perry, you would have more hands-on experience than I do, but it depends. Presumably, it's one inspection for each, the post-provisional license inspection and the post-final license inspection. But in practice, depending on what happens when they get here, if there's a whole bunch of things they find that need to be corrected, they may come back 2 or more times. But Perry, please add on.
We were lucky because when we went through that process, we just had the single inspection for the PPLI and the PFLI. And I don't necessarily think we were lucky, we were prepared. Yes, we were very prepared. So the advice
You had good counsel.
You are just all over the plug today.
Dan has cards for all of you. So the piece of advice that I would give you is to be organized and keep lists, because there is a process for going through the inspection, and it's pretty laid out for you. So the Cannabis Control Commission will provide you with a checklist. Make sure that everything is checked off that checklist, and then also try to anticipate any sort of areas where you might have a weakness. So you can anticipate the types of questions that they're going to ask. I think that that's the best thing that you can do as you're embarking on this adventure. Just be organized and make sure that you're staying on top of everything that you should be doing. So when that inspection comes, you're well prepared and they have no comments to make, and you don't have to wait for another inspection, because that's something that can delay your process.
Oh, this is a good one. I mean, you sort of went over it, but what's an RFI? And this is an interesting one. How many RFIs are too many RFIs?
So an RFI is the acronym for a request for more information from the Cannabis Control Commission, and this occurs during the licensing process, the provisional licensing process. So we talked about it a little bit, but if you submit something that they may need more information on, it's an incomplete filing, something was just incorrect in your application, they'll send you what's called an RFI that says, you know, you missed these 3 components, you know, go back and review your policies and procedures, or, oh, you put the wrong birth date on your background check form or something, whatever it might be. So that's what an RFI, how many should you expect? You know, that's just it just depends on how well prepared you are, as Perry said earlier, for filing the application. If you really just try and do it quick and dirty and get it in, you could have several. You know, I've seen people come to us after their 5th or 6th RFI and said, hey, I just can't figure this out. Can you help me get through? Can you help me identify what they're looking for? But you should be able to satisfy everything they need after 1, maybe 2 requests for information.
How many did we have? 1. Yeah, more preparation. Okay, so but there's a bunch of questions, but it's almost one, so I'm just going to pick this one. How often does the CCC hold hearings, and who gets rejected?
The CCC holds hearings monthly. Who gets rejected? I guess anyone that is recommended to be rejected from the staff. The staff will work to review your application, and they are the group that makes the first determination as to whether or not you should be approved or rejected. So if they recommend that you get rejected, you will get rejected. But I think that we've only seen a handful of rejections out of the 1,000 or so applications that have been approved. I want to say maybe, I don't know, maybe 10, maybe 6 licenses have been rejected.
Do you have any like just an example of a reason? 'Cause I can think of one that
The diversity plan and the positive impact plan, if you can expand on why those are reasons why people's applications get rejected.
Yeah, definitely from an RFI perspective, diversity plans and positive impact plans will get a lot of scrutiny.
But have they gotten to that? You'd get an RFI for that, or would it go to they'd put you on the agenda just to reject you for that?
Well, I don't know, Tomas, maybe you've seen something. I certainly could have not seen it. I think the one that I remember probably most vividly was a group that, and this was very early on in the licensing process, their entire policy package was based off of the medical regulations, which at the time were totally different from the adult use regulations, and the state basically said, look, you're so far off here, we're not going to work with you to get it right. We're going to reject you, but it didn't stop them from reapplying and ultimately getting approved. But they did get rejected the first time around because it was just so far off from what they were expected. But I haven't seen that at all ever recently. So I think it was sort of an early on. This is kind of a warning shot for people to pay a little more attention and make sure that they're putting together applications that are meaningful.
So we're going to break. I really appreciate your attention. You guys are great. Questions are great. We are back here again at 2:30 to go over the different license types. There's plenty of places to eat in the neighborhood. If you need to find your focus, the dispensary is open. I know it's a lot of information. So we will see you back here at 2:30. Oh, sure, sure.
Thing is located zoning. Where's the zoning is located? 1010 Massive for this process.
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Where's the
Zoning for City of Boston?
yes?
So
For
1010.
cannabis control is on 1010 Massive.
Well, so the zoning code is available online, and I would recommend using the zoning viewer and the zoning code to help you identify what's applicable. But 1010 Mass Ave is Boston Inspectional Services Department,
Yeah.
so that is where you file your
Okay.
initial plans for that rejection set. That's where you get your rejection and file your appeal to the Zoning Board of
Yeah,
Appeals,
okay.
and it's sort of your,
for-
they're the gatekeeper for building in Boston.
Okay. And for the how you say it? BCB here.
The Boston Cannabis Board.
Yes.
Their office is in City Hall, but everything is, the best way to get them is through email. Email the contact person at Jasmine Wynn at the Boston Cannabis Board. Her information is all available online.
Great, thanks guys, we'll see you at 2:30.
Thank you.
told you, you got time. You have an hour.
Where's the handheld, the wireless?
Right there on the exhibit sheet right there.
Thing is I can try setting up over there, Mike, but
Hi, everybody. I hope you had a chance to get lunch and all that. Welcome back to Cannabiz 101. It's a 3-day seminar in and we have been had a great morning. We have another session for you this afternoon on the different license types. I know it can be confusing, but we are going to go through the license types. It's pretty straightforward. So what we want to do, because we've received a lot of questions online through the live stream, is go through this session and leave a lot of time for the panelist discussion so that we can answer all of your questions. So if you have questions, they don't have to be limited to this subject matter. We're really going to try to get everybody in and answer everybody that's submitted things online today. So without further ado, yeah. Here's Dan Glissman again. You remember him from earlier. He was kind enough to fill the slot 2 times today because we lost a commissioner, but he's going to take over for license types. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you all again. So, yeah, as April said, we're going to talk about license types now. This isn't nearly as robust of a presentation as the licensing app was, and that we're not going to go through everything. So I'll run you guys through everything, and then we'll leave as much time as we can for Q&A here. But we're here right now to talk about the various license types that are available for cannabis establishments in Massachusetts. And each slide is going to go through a different establishment, and I'll just give you guys kind of an overview of the practical implications for each of them. So here we have a craft marijuana cooperative. There's not that many of these, to my knowledge, that have actually really commenced any form of operation. Maybe only 4 have applied in the state, but I think I have a slide at the end that will confirm that. But yeah, these are, sort of were designed for farming communities, farming cooperatives, to allow folks to use a little bit of shared space/equipment to make their operations a little bit easier. But it is a cooperative. People have to have lived in Massachusetts for a year, and that's really the crux of it. These license types will count towards any of your cultivation license cap, tier license cap, which we'll talk about in a second. So any amount of canopy that you would have under a craft cooperative would also count towards your total canopy cap as a general applicant if you were to have other licenses. So cultivator, obviously this is a very popular license type. These facilities are generally large facilities. They're often quite expensive to construct, and it is what the name entails. It's the location where you're cultivating, growing your cannabis, your cannabis products. So the cultivator licenses have several different tiers in Massachusetts. And I'll detail that in a second, but there is a limitation on any owner or business that can't have more than 100,000 square feet of canopy in Massachusetts. So obviously understanding how they measure canopy is an important component. And basically canopy is measured by an identifiable boundary within the grow room. So you're not just taking the 4 corners of the 4 walls of the room, you're actually measuring the benching space, or if you're an outdoor cultivator, you might be measuring the hedgerows that you're plowing into your fields. and it's a critical component of designing your facility to understand how much canopy you can actually fit within the building, because that implicates what license type you apply for, and how much your fees are, and how much you can ultimately grow and expand into. As you can see, there's 11 different tiers for a cultivator. In your licensing application, you'll have to select which tier you want to operate in. And I didn't mention it in the state licensing slides, but the application that I showed everyone in the earlier session was just for the marijuana retailer. They're largely the same, all of the licensing applications, but they have some unique components if it's a cultivator or a product manufacturer or a micro business or a delivery. So some sort of, typical or components to that application. Like if you're a cultivator, you need to provide a policy that identifies how you're going to grow the product. If you're a product manufacturer, you need to explain how you're going to produce and what types of edibles and marijuana products are you going to produce. But these licensed cultivator tiers increase every 5,000 square feet for the first two, and then 10,000 all the way up to 100,000. And you cannot exceed 100,000, I said already, 100,000 square feet of canopy over all of your licenses. So you're capped at 3 total licenses and 100,000 square feet of canopy. So you could own several different businesses, but as long as you but you cannot at any point exceed collectively 100,000 square feet. Independent testing labs, the name is very clear. They're the testing labs. There are several in the state now. You may have read about some of the earlier bottlenecks in the industry from lack of testing labs when there were only 2. But there is more capacity now that there are more labs, but this is where all the products are sent and tested for potency and to ensure that they comply with all the CCC standards. The marijuana courier, so you can think of this as like the Uber Eats model. These establishments aren't authorized to store or warehouse any cannabis products. They are designed to be a business that comes to a dispensary like Seed and picks up cannabis products and delivers it directly to the consumers. So they really are, if you think about it, like an Uber Eats model, where you want to order McDonald's through Uber Eats, they're going to go pick it up and deliver it to you. But the transaction actually occurs through the dispensary. This was the original sort of marijuana delivery license that they were considering in Massachusetts, and there was a significant amount of debate on whether this should be the only available delivery type. And ultimately they added the marijuana wholesale operator delivery license, which is the next slide. So the marijuana delivery operator is distinct from the courier in that these establishments actually can warehouse the product. So you could buy wholesale cannabis from a grower, store it at your facility, and deliver it directly to consumers. So instead of being in a sense, a business-to-business end user, you can go directly to consumers. The transactions, can run through your system. So that's the marijuana delivery operator. These are largely in the process of being licensed right now. There are several in the queue. But they're still working on getting open and operational. I think maybe one of them is a final license right now. Oh, and we mentioned this before, but I'll add, for the marijuana courier and the marijuana delivery operator, those licenses are only social equity and economic empowerment applicants are eligible to be granted those licenses for 3 years after the date that the first of that license type opens. So as soon as the first delivery operator license opens, then that will start the 3-year countdown. And the commission has the authority to expand that timeline through their regulatory process. Marijuana research facility, defined as an academic institution or nonprofit corporation to conduct research, essentially. So this is if you are working towards, finding the benefits of cannabis that may not have been explored yet, and but you don't necessarily want to operate an independent testing lab, or obviously you don't want to run a cannabis facility. This is another opportunity to allow the universities or other institutions to get into the research and development arm of cannabis. Marijuana micro businesses. These are really unique license type. They allow both cultivation and product manufacturing. And you can also be eligible for a delivery endorsement on the micro business, which would allow you to deliver directly to consumers. Originally, this was going to be the only license type that would have had delivery direct to consumer because of this delivery endorsement. But micro businesses are allowed to have up to 5,000 square feet of canopy, and they can have a product manufacturing facility. If you're just a product manufacturing micro business, you are limited in the amount of cannabis you can purchase, and that's up to 2,000 pounds per year on the wholesale market. Micro businesses have Massachusetts residency ownership requirements as well. Product manufacturing. Earlier we had a gentleman talking about infusing beverages or edibles, foods with cannabis. This would all fall under the marijuana product manufacturing license. Essentially, anytime you're taking THC and infusing it into anything, you're gonna be under the product manufacturing license type. So if you're a cultivator, for example, not a micro business because they have authorizations under both license types, but if you're a cultivator and you want to be able to also do extractions and processing at your facility, you would need both license types from the Cannabis Control Commission, both the marijuana cultivator and the marijuana product manufacturing. And from a practical perspective, most of the time when we see cultivator operations, we see that they typically always apply for the product manufacturing license, just because they really are, two uses that go together. Retailers, again, the name says it all, but the marijuana retailers are adult use retailers on the that's the license type that's specifically authorized to sell adult use products. If you want to sell medical products, you have to be a registered marijuana dispensary, and you can be a co-located adult and medical retail, but you have to have both license types. So Seed, for example, marijuana retailer authorized to sell adult use products to persons 21 and older. Yeah. Micro business. Yep. You can be authorized for a delivery endorsement under the micro business license type, and that would allow you to deliver direct to consumer, but you don't have a storefront, if you will, as a micro business. It's still a sort of back of the house business operation. Yep. Transporters. So you have a couple of companies out there that are transportation businesses. There's a lot of regulation around how you transport cannabis in Massachusetts within the regulations, and so there are a few businesses out there that have specialized in transporting product from the cultivation facilities to the retailers, and that's essentially what the third-party transporter is. It has nothing to do with deliveries to consumers. It's just a business-to-business license type that allows you to transport products as a third party outside of the supply chain from point A to point B. There is also a license type about existing licensee transporters, but those are less common because the cultivator and retailer licenses themselves come with the authority to transport the products. Some people don't take the step of buying transportation vans and getting them outfitted to comply with the regulations, and so they just use these third-party transporter programs. But you can, as a cultivator or dispensary or product manufacturer, you could, if you wanted to make the expenditure, put together a transportation van and do it yourself. Earlier, we had a question about the license and application fees. So you see in the first box here all the cultivator licenses, and they are modified based on indoor versus outdoor cultivation and as to the tier size. So you can see the application fees themselves on the left, the leftmost box, and the fees are very reasonable. You know, for an indoor cultivator, anywhere from $200 to $2,000 for the various tiers. Outdoor, $100 to $1,500. The annual licensing fees themselves are a little bit more expensive. You have anywhere from $1,250 for the tier 1 indoor cultivator to $50,000 for the tier 11 cultivator. We talked about the craft cooperative fees as well, listed here. Product manufacturers, the license application fee is $1,500. The annual license fee is $10,000. And again, the fees all the way to the right, those are annual, so you're paying that every renewal. And you pay initially at the time of receipt of provisional. So you get approved for your provisional license. You've only at this point paid the $1,500 application fee. Once you get approved for your provisional license, you have 90 days to pay your full license fee, and then your license renews annually as of the date that you pay that license fee. That once you pay your annual license fee, that's when you're actually activated as a licensee. So the commission won't come out and give you an inspection or let you move forward in the process until you've paid the fee and are officially activated as a cannabis establishment. And again, under the regulations, the rule is that you must pay your licensing fee within 90 days of receiving your provisional license. So just the rest of the fees, I'll just run through them quickly. Micro business has no licensing fee. 50% of the applicable license fee to that use. Independent testing labs, $1,500, $10,000. Same all the way from marijuana retailers, social consumption, which you can see we discussed earlier. Social consumption is a part of the regulations. It's allowed by the Cannabis Control Commission, if you will, but it's not yet been put into practice in any of the municipalities. And if you can't get through the local process in Mass, you can't start the state licensing. Transporters, $1,500 to $5,000. Courier, $1,500 to $5,000. Delivery operator, same, $1,500. Application fee, $10,000. Annual license fee. Delivery endorsement for a micro business, $500 or $5,000 for your annual fee. Research facilities, $300, $1,000. Research permit, $1,000 for each application and your annual license fee. So this licensing application list, just to give you guys a sense of where everything is. Again, this comes directly from the Cannabis Control Commission's monthly hearings. If you want to get a good sense of where the market is at in terms of applications that have been filed and how they're being processed, the executive director's report on the licensing progress is very informative. This is one of several slides that he covers, but this just shows you the total number of licenses that have been approved, so provisional licenses and beyond, for each license type. So as of November, there'd only been one marijuana delivery operator that was approved, 285 cultivators, 218 product manufacturers, and 379 marijuana retailers. So I think the last time I checked, there was, I want to say, 190 retailers that were open in the Commonwealth, and maybe 75 cultivators. So, you know, we're rapidly working towards, you know, what we would probably perceive as a fully built out Massachusetts market. Another thing that they've been discussing at the Cannabis Control Commission meetings recently is the total amount of canopy that's been applied for and approved in Massachusetts from a cultivator's perspective. So a lot of really good information on the license types and how they're all progressing through the system at the Cannabis Control Commission's monthly meetings. I would encourage anyone really who's interested in licensing a cannabis establishment in Mass should tune in to one of these monthly meetings. There's actually one this week, this Thursday. It'll be the first one of the new year, and they didn't have a meeting in December, so it'll be a pretty full agenda, I suspect, and there'll be a lot to discuss. So if you haven't and you tune into one, it's definitely worth the time. They're long meetings for sure, but if you're willing to sit here and listen to me drone on and on, I'm sure you'll be more excited with the actual workings of the Cannabis Control Commission. So with that, thank you guys again for coming out here today to hear the presentations. That was the end of the panel, or the presentation component of the license types. And, I think we're going to go back a little bit to discuss some other licensing questions, and then we can, of course, answer any questions on the license types as well. So thanks, everybody. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I don't know that I have a clear answer to it. Obviously, the market, the market dictates what the need is. And, some of these license types, specifically the delivery license types, came online much later in the process. So all the retail licenses that you see here that have been approved, many have been working through the process for several years, some of whom probably started in 2017, 2018, and they're, finally making their way through. I mean, Boston is a perfect example. There's been, I think at this point, maybe 40 host community agreements given out, but that's really it's been a big push over the last year and change. So I think there's a little bit of a time delay when you look at the retail, or the total number of licenses to where they are, because folks have really been working on them for a long time. So, you'll see the numbers of the other license categories increasing as time goes on, because just the nature of the process here in Mass is it takes a little bit of time to move through the process. But otherwise, it's strictly a business decision. You know, the retail stores, I think for many were the most obvious approach to get into cannabis, and they were the lesser expensive option as compared to a cultivator. And sort of originally you were looking at cultivation, product manufacturing licenses, and retail were really the two categories.
So you can have a seat, Dan. We're going to move along, get some questions and all that stuff, and get you a mic. Awesome.
Did you want to weigh in on her question at all as to why there's a push for retailers as opposed to some of the other license types?
I mean, I think there's a lot of, initially anyways, a lot of interest in retail. You know, I think a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds feel comfortable in retail. Maybe they have retail experience or restaurant experience or something that is translatable, whereas something like cultivation, or specifically cultivation, it just requires so much technical knowledge, especially even if you've grown cannabis in your home or your grandma's basement or wherever you've grown cannabis. It's very different doing that than it is on a commercial scale, and I think also the capital requirement for that one is very big. And then in terms of delivery, again, it's just a lot of logistics. Unless you have a background in that, I don't think as many of the industries are as translatable to that than they are to retail. So I think a lot of people aim that way. Sure. I just want to take a moment to introduce, so at this point you guys have been here for the day. You know Dan, you know myself, April, and you met Perry earlier. This is Tomas Gonzalez. You are now with the 3 partners of SEED, and we have been working together on this project for over 3 years. Tomas is chief of staff, and you will often see him running around sort of holding down the fort. So I'm glad to finally introduce him because he's the man behind the scenes a lot of the time, especially for events like this. So welcome, Tomas.
Thank you, Tomas.
Yeah. So if you have any questions on the licensing categories, great. We'll start here.
Thank you. With the, you mentioned earlier that the licenses for the consumer establishment, they out there, are they taking applications for them?
No.
So
no,
they're not
yeah.
taking applications at all?
That's
Okay.
right.
And for the delivery courier, is that subject to a specific area, or is that statewide for all the licenses?
Yeah, it's the same as the delivery operators. So as the courier is a more unique license type because in some municipalities, from a zoning perspective, you may not be required to go through the same hurdles as a traditional cannabis establishment because you aren't actually storing product. You're sort of just a staging location for your vans, or your office, if you will. So you still do need a host community agreement, but you don't necessarily have to go through all the same hurdles. Like in Boston, for example, they don't loop the marijuana courier into their cannabis establishment definition, so you can be allowed as of right in certain areas. You don't have to follow the same protocols that you might if you were a delivery. But as to the locations, you would have, your central hub, and then you work with the dispensary operators. So you would contract with SEED and deliver to their customers. Their customers come in, they get verified as being allowed to purchase cannabis, they pass their ID in here, and then they can order through SEED, and you can be the delivery courier business that drops it off, and you'll usually charge a fee for that delivery.
Would that also apply also for the marijuana delivery operator? My understanding is that they are allowed to have their own product as well.
Yeah, that's right. The operator is different in that you're a wholesale, you could purchase wholesale product on the market. store it at your facility and deliver it directly to the consumers. You'd probably get a courier license as well. If you want to be a courier for seed, you'd need a courier license.
And I would just say, if you were going to go for one delivery, you would probably go for both, right? Because you'd want to do both of those things. And it's more of a challenge for the operator because you have to have your own vault, and now you're responsible for cannabis, and now you need all the insurance that goes with that, and all the liability, and all of the licensing. But it remains to be seen how courier is going to collect revenue. So are they going, when you say you're charged for delivery, are you going to charge the dispensary? Are you going to charge the consumer? Is that going to be competitive with operator? So those, I think if you're going to go for delivery, you would go for both. And Perry, you want to say something?
Yeah, so also, to make it easy, I always think of the delivery operator as kind of a mobile dispensary, right? So you'd be like a seed, but on wheels. So you'd need someplace to have your product. And one of the other complicating factors is that means if you're going to be a wholesaler, that you're going to have to establish relationships with all of the wholesalers and convince them that they should sell product to you. And also have the funds on hand to pay for the inventory that you're going to keep.
I'll just add one thing about the delivery operators, and that is that one of the specific things that was covered in as they were debating how to roll out these operator licenses was that they didn't want, they being the state, the commission, the regulatory body, did not want people to fill their vans with cannabis and park them on the Mass Pike or 93 in a park and ride and wait for orders. So you have a specific limitation on the amount of cannabis you can have in your vehicle at one time, and they have all the cannabis in your vehicle has to be tied to a specific order. So you're not just buying 100 vans, loading them with cannabis and parking them all over the state on a Saturday afternoon. You're waiting for those orders to come in, and then you're going out for the delivery. And certainly makes it more difficult from a logistics perspective, but I think the safety concerns outweighed the logistics for the dispensary operators there.
Question is about the operator license. Yes, but what I try to understand is this: how you get the product? You go to to seed, or you go to where to get the product, or you can get the product from the manufacturer and bring it to your house, and then no, you have to see how it works.
You could do it two ways. So you could, as a delivery operator, you could go pick it up from a wholesaler and then bring it back to your vault and then market it to your people, sell it, load your truck, and deliver it. Or you could be delivered to by the wholesaler, just like a dispensary. So a wholesaler could deliver to you just like we get deliveries from wholesalers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, maybe clarify what storage looks like, not in what a vault looks like and the inspection process.
Yeah, so a vault is a pretty, they're complex. I wouldn't say they're complex. They are defined in the regulations. So it's a very specific space, and construction-wise and security-wise and limited access, temperature control. So a lot of those parts of it are what you'd have to build into your facility if you were going to do delivery operator, if you want to add anything.
Yeah. You don't need the order to, okay. You don't need orders from consumers to get the product from a wholesaler. You can anticipate. You can say, I think I'm going to sell 100 vapes this week, and I'm going to buy 100 vapes from the wholesaler. And then it's your job to make sure you sell those 100 vapes, and then you can sell them however. They're already gone from the wholesaler. So you don't need the order in order to pick up from the wholesaler under the operator model.
Yep, it's wholesale to consumer. Or you can work for dispensary. I mean, the difficulty in being a delivery operator in this environment is you have to have your own consumer base. So if you want to access Seed's consumer base or an existing dispensary consumer base, then you want to work with that dispensary. The other challenge is that in this state, many of the operators, particularly cultivators, are vertically integrated, meaning they have their own dispensaries. So there's going to be some conflict inherent in the relationship, because if I'm a wholesaler and I sell you a vape for $50 and I sell it at my dispensary for $75 and you go out and sell it for $60, I'm not going to sell you my vape anymore, right? So there's a lot of interplay that remains to be seen how this is going to work out. And, we're building the plane while we fly it.
And some of this may sound negative and like we're trying to discourage you from doing it, but that's not the case. We just want to make sure that everyone is informed to make wise decisions as you move forward. Because as April just said, there are certain things that just maybe not have been thought through all the way. And as it's evolving, we'll see where it goes. But again, going back to the analogy that I talked about before, the delivery operator is like a dispensary on wheels. The delivery courier is like one of the food company, what do you call that?
Uber Eats?
Uber Eats, like Uber Eats, picking up from the restaurant and bringing the food to your home. So Uber Eats doesn't have a lot of food just in their car waiting for you to call so they can deliver it. They're going to pick it up and then they're bringing it to you.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. My question for the audience insight is just, do you have any considerations that the audience should look at when trying to decide which license type to go for? So, for instance, like in Boston, what is the most common license type people are going for, and why do you?
Retail.
Yeah, definitely in Boston it's retail, because Boston is very densely populated, right? So it needs a lot of liquor stores and cannabis stores and grocery stores and all the things. So that's the most popular in Boston, but certainly aren't people going for a ton of retail in Fitchburg. But there's a lot of cultivation in Fitchburg because it's cheap property and all of that. I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I just wanted to agree with that. I think the differences between the two is the cost per square foot in the city of Boston. You're going to maximize on a retailer space where, that's overwhelming if you're trying to do cultivation. There's one person who received an HCA for cultivation. I don't think there's another person in Boston. I know there's folks trying, but it's a huge lift to get manufacturing just because of the cost of square footage and real estate.
And April can speak to how difficult cultivation is when I don't know if she shared this with you, it's in the bio, but when she started out in 2014, she launched a cultivation operation in Connecticut, and it is really challenging. There's so many different aspects to cultivation that make it difficult to enter. So the capital requirements to launch, because the build out is really expensive, dealing with mold and mildew issues. April, if you want to add more.
Yeah, I mean, I equate it all the time to having, if any of you have children, you've had an infant, maybe two at a time. You have 1,000 infants, thousands of infants, and you can't walk away, you can't take a weekend, you can't say I'm sick, nothing stops. It just never stops, and there's always something. There's, like we were saying, pests, powdery mildew, all of these things, your inability to use products that would help you combat these things. Also at the time, I mean, I think there's much more skill in the industry now, but when I was launching Curaleaf, there was a bunch of experts in Colorado, and there was an East Coast with no commercial cannabis operations. Connecticut was literally, we were one of the first to open, And so you had a bunch of people coming in saying, I can grow a lot of cannabis. And in a place where there's no humidity and there's no testing. And then they came to Connecticut and were like, everything's moldy and full of yeast and goodbye. You know, so you're kind of dealing with that. And humidity growing here is no joke, and it's very expensive. Just building it out is expensive, all that. So I think that, and of course the capital, the initial capital just to outfit those types of facilities. I think the last one that I saw was still at about $420 a square foot, which is ironic, but amazing and true, just for the facility. So you're already in like $20 to $30 million before you even start, depending on the size of your grow. These micro licenses you can do, you know, obviously they're smaller, so the hope is that we get some sort of craft industry, but you're still dealing with a lot of just moving parts. And then not only are you launching cultivation, you're also usually manufacturing and delivering. And are there any more license types buried in there? Yeah, so if you're doing that, you're usually doing these 3 businesses. So it's a lot at once.
So I had a question. So
You need to talk in about.
if you are a general applicant with a micro license, can you get the endorsement for delivery when that's only for EE and SE?
It's a good question. I think you can, but I need to go back and look at that. I know you could originally, but they may have changed that when they limited delivery to only social equity and economic empowerment. So I'd have to confirm. I think I know I have several micro business clients, but they also are equity, so I haven't come across the issue specifically.
And I guess my only other follow-up question to that is, we didn't really get into social consumption. How would that look as a license type on the ground? Because right now it's really just edibles. It's not like someone could smoke in a place. So I don't know if you wanted to just elaborate on what social consumption would look like in its current form if nothing else changes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have too much insight on what it would look like, only because a hugely critical component as to what social consumption is going to look like is going to depend on how that particular municipality wants it to look. And just because they have such strong oversight powers on the way that they regulate businesses within their borders, I think notwithstanding what the state rules say, the municipalities could change them all as they go and develop social consumption as we sort of move forward. So, other than what you already gave them, I don't think I have much more to add to that.
And I was just thinking about, let's go to you guys. I was just going to say, somebody asked earlier about, the most popular license types. I would say the fastest growing category of license type, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm guessing, is manufacturing. Because so many people want to get in and make their own gummies or cookies or whatever, and that's a more reasonable sort of bite to take.
Hi, I just wanted to know, like, how would I get into being a retailer? And also, do retailers work with dispensaries? Yeah, those are my only 2 questions.
So we're using retailer and dispensary synonymously. So those 2 are the same. So if you're a dispensary, you are selling retail cannabis. Wholesaler are the people that are growing and manufacturing. And then how do you get into it is you take a 3-day seminar called Cannabiz 101, and you've already taken the first step. So it's really exciting. No, it's not an answerable question. It takes so much, there's so many parts, and that's why we do these 8 modules and all that. So that's it. Just inform yourself, and put in the time and effort and the work. Did you have a question too? There were 2 over there, right?
For the social, just want to clarify, my social consumption fee was listed, license, but you say that it's not being given, correct?
That's correct.
All right.
Yep. the regulations specifically have a whole section on social consumption. I mean, you can go into 935 CMR 500, which is the Massachusetts Code of Regulations, and that's where all of the cannabis regs are for Massachusetts at the state level for adult use. And you can read all about how you'll have to operate a social consumption facility if and when we get there at the local level. So you can certainly, get prepared for and be knowledgeable on social consumption. But I would note also that social consumption licenses are limited to equity applicants and economic empowerment applicants as well.
Originally, I'm a chef, so originally I'm a chef, and I'm trying to look all the different angles, and I've been smoking Sam 14. So basically, I want to see, now that this opportunity is here, I want to see all the angles that are possible, how to get into the industry, For example, if I was to give a cooking class on cannabis, would I need a license, even if it's private?
I mean, absolutely. If your people are paying you to come and you're using cannabis in your classes, I mean, there may be some interpretations otherwise, but certainly the conservative approach would be if you're working with cannabis and giving cannabis, that you're going to need licensing, and something like that where you're actively infusing cannabis into food products for a class, that probably falls under a similar social consumption style license at some point. But I'll say that there's always a need for good culinary minds in the cannabis industry. So talk to some of those cultivators and product manufacturers out there who are looking to create new lines and new products out there in cannabis.
Yeah, and you could, I've seen before where, we've done it before as part of like a patient appreciation, the medical program, where you can instruct people. So you set up and you have your ingredients and you instruct people all but for the cannabis. So you're actually teaching them how to cook with it, because there are issues with it. It doesn't mix, it's lipophilic, you can't really get it evenly spread out throughout food products. So there is an art to that, and I think that doesn't require a license. You can teach people how to do that as long as you're not actually infusing the product.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
And there was a club. So a lot of the ways people try to get around this is you pay a fee to belong to a club, and then when you go to that club, you use cannabis and have cannabis-infused meals, and you can smoke cannabis and do all the things. And that sort of survived for a little while it was under the radar, but then they shut it down. So all of those kind of pieces, like a private event, if you're getting paid for it and supplying the cannabis, you're definitely in trouble. If you're getting paid for it and the people are bringing their own cannabis, I think you probably still have a problem. If you're just instructing. What is it? Oh yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, if they're in their own house, legally consuming cannabis, and you're on the Zoom going, look, I'm adding cannabis and I'm doing things. Yeah, no, I think that's fine, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're not giving them any cannabis. You're not working with them actively on cannabis. I think it's very creative. I like it.
Yeah, Dan likes it. You're in.
I'll sign up.
Oh yeah.
Thank you. I had a question about social consumption, and you use the terms if and when that becomes possible. Is that something, just a general question, is that something that we could be looking forward to in the city of Boston in the upcoming years?
City of Boston? You know how long it took us to do what we're doing?
Yeah, and I know it seems like it's one of the last things on the list, but being it could be popular, and a bunch of retailers may take advantage of it. And you mentioned that it's right now it's only available for the social equity applicants. say it does become available, no social equity applicants take advantage of the process, would multi-state operators, what would be the popularity of that and them taking advantage of that?
My first comment on that is if you're interested in social consumption, talk to your elected officials, talk to the folks that are making these decisions, and voice your opinion. I mean, we need to hear from the constituents that now is the time to activate social consumption, and and you guys have a powerful voice, so take advantage of it.
Yeah, and it's probably worth, I know we talked about it a little earlier in the day, but it's probably worth just sort of recapping. So the ballot initiative included social consumption, cannabis cafes, right? The drafted the regulations have a section on social consumption. There is now debate at the legislative level that there's not even the mechanism to implement social consumption even if they wanted to. And then there's debate about whether that debate is legitimate or is people stalling because they don't want social consumption. So there's that side of it. Then, like Dan was saying, every municipality can say, we don't want to touch that with a 20-foot pole, it sounds like a nightmare, or yeah, we like business and we like people, so come on in. And you can already sort of look around and see which cities and towns are going to go in which direction just by the way they go in everything, which is why Tomas is astounded, because the city of Boston had a tendency in the program to sort of wait and see how it goes in other places. And so that's kind of where we are, if that sort of provides any clarity.
I would even take it just one step further. So there were 9 pilot cities, Boston being the biggest one in the entire New England area, wasn't even one of the pilot cities. So that in itself is a problem, right? So you have previous administrations that aren't really marijuana friendly. So whether it's Marty Walsh or even now with Mayor Wu, they're not 100% behind cannabis. Obviously the staff is, Mayor Janey was, but not in our current situation. I would say the also other thing we don't talk about that is going to make this a little bit more complicated if people want to actually smoke in lounges when we ever get to that point, or in social consumption spots, is the public health law dealing with why we can't smoke in any places anymore. So it's almost like a 2 tracks. Like you have to deal with the regs and the advisory board so that they can make recommendations to the larger commission and to the whole commission. But it's also a legislative track with Secretary of State and the legislature making sure that there's a carve out for the public health law. So like a cigar bar, like a hookah bar, there would be social consumption spots.
As a delivery operator, are you allowed to operate out of various different warehouses, or are you restricted to one warehouse?
Yeah, you're restricted to one. You can have 2 licenses as a delivery operator. You can have 2 delivery licenses. So you could have two facilities, if you will, across the state.
I was just going to say, I don't think you have to park your trucks or your delivery vehicles at your location, though.
I don't think so. I think you can.
So you could park it.
Yeah.
You could park them anywhere. Yeah, but you don't.
You certainly can. Absolutely.
You can, but you don't have
Absolutely.
to. So if you wanted to park if it was more convenient to park your vehicles elsewhere, let's say you were courier and you wanted to park them elsewhere and go pick up and drop off and all that. So just something to think about. Any other questions here from you guys? Oh, yeah?
This question was more related to the zoning. If you could just, the zoning code system and the online tool, if you can go a little bit in depth on how that works. And just a question to that, because I know the city of Boston, they work with the Metro Housing List. They have a tool basically where you can kind of just input your information and you'll be able to be supplied with housing, opportunities or, housing listings to where you may fit in the average median income. They kind of have that AMI tool to where you can just put in information and you can kind of get that. So I was wondering if there will ever be
I'm
a...
gonna actually do it for you.
Oh, okay, okay.
Show everybody.
Okay.
So this is actually one of my favorite things.
It's a great tool to be
You
used.
can have it, April. So boston.gov. You hit departments. You're gonna look for planning and development, because that's who we mentioned earlier, that's where the zoning lives, for the entire city of Boston. Sorry. Oh. If it's good for Wu, it's good for me. Joe said that. All right. So, learn about your agency. Now you're gonna go to zoning. You're gonna go to the zoning viewer. Anybody throw out an address. Any address. Yeah. It's the best. I heard it's the best dispensary.
Give me my address.
Yeah, address. All right, 401 Center. It's gonna ask you to clarify and make sure you have the right one. And then it's gonna create this, what you see on the right-hand side. So it's gonna give you the parcel ID number, the address, the owner. It's gonna give you the assessor's report, the property viewer, but more importantly, the zoning. So the zoning main district, so this is Jamaica Plain neighborhood. The sub-district is local convenience, LC. Oh, I even spelled it out for you. And a zoning overlay would mean like if you have parking, if you have any other restrictions like that that are like, I'm thinking of the one with the water. No, groundwater, yeah, small businesses. But I was thinking more like groundwater trust. If there's like an environmental sort of impact, they would put that as an overlay. It's just a way of protecting the area just a little bit more.
Additional layer of zoning
Yeah.
controls.
And this is really where you will find almost all of this in the
And
table.
you should point out the zoning, the references go back, the references to the zoning code on the viewer.
Yep, let me go back to it.
JP West
Roxbury and Roxbury,
Oh.
have a neighborhood council built into the zoning.
Yeah, Jamaica Plain, West Roxbury, Charlestown are the only three. Okay. You know why I'm laughing? I know I can't help it, they won't shut it.
Yeah, so
All
you
right.
can see the reference on the, where it says map number and article number.
Yep.
That tells you which zoning code section to look at.
So look through, and so if you go through this, most of it is, there's a lot of explanation, but you want to start at the table. Here we go. No, a little more.
First step, you go to Boston.gov. The next link is
The address in.
I just Google Boston zoning viewer,
Yeah.
and you should be able to get it. Tomas showed you the correct
Boston
way to do
zoning
it,
viewer.
but you can just Google it.
That's fine. Am I not hit the table?
you have to put Cannabiz? No. No.
You don't have to put street or anything. It'll pick that up on its own. It'll tell you if it's a boulevard, an avenue, a street, a road.
Yeah, just the number and the street name.
And what I just want to show you here is just a table on how the city sets it up.
Yeah, it's informative. I think it's pretty good. It goes.
Go to New York.
One more time.
Yeah. All right.
There we go. That's the one I want.
Yeah.
All right, so as you can see, it'll take you through all of, so there are 274 uses in the city of Boston. This goes through all of them. Banking and postal use, cultural uses, dormitories. We're gonna bring you all the way down to retail, because that's the one that matters
For retail.
for retailers. There we go. And so you heard earlier, that it's either an allowed use, a conditional use, or a forbidden use within our zoning, A, F, or C. So here, one family, two family, three family, multifamily, all of this is a forbidden use in all of these areas. This is a completely residential. So you don't want this one. You want to keep going down. Believe it or not, it's actually longer. So it goes through all of them. And now we are at local convenience, neighborhood shopping. Those are the two overlays for Jamaica Plain. If you're a basement in the first story and you are in a retail space, you are a conditional use. You saw the difference between the last one. It was a forbidden use in residential areas. It is a conditional use everywhere else in the city of Boston. And this is the easiest way to figure out the zoning. Oh my God. So I thought if anyone's had any questions on that, I don't know if that answers your question, but it gets you all the way through. It tells you what the zoning is, and it even lets you look at the property.
Dan, is there anything else on there you think would be useful to point out? And jump on there.
You can, you know, the zoning code is a large document. You see everything on the side here are all the various neighborhoods and articles that govern each neighborhood. So it is very specific. So you do have to start with the zoning viewer to help you understand where you are. And you can look at the zoning maps as well, although the zoning viewer kind of gives you the information that's available on the maps. But, you know, this process is not, you know, although this is specific to Boston, it's the same sort of concept in other municipalities. You'll Google their zoning code and look up their zoning map and match where your property is to find what district you're in, and then see if you can do a cannabis establishment there, et cetera, et cetera.
And
So-
then he had a question here, this gentleman had a question about, is this specific to cannabis, or this is just general zoning?
Everything.
So this is just general zoning?
Yeah, so
No
restaurants.
matter what you're doing, this is what you access.
What about the specific to know if the zoning can be for cannabis and the...
Conditional use?
No, it's not about conditional use.
Yes, it's about conditional use.
That's right.
Yeah, but when you say conditional use, I know you're conditional, but you can apply for cannabis dispensary if you wanna apply for?
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
conditional
so
use?
what's going to happen is an allowed use, like most things aren't even an allowed use. An allowed use is like a convenience store. So that means I don't necessarily have to go through a community process in order to cite the business. Every single cannabis establishment, regardless of what it is, has to go through a community process. It's a conditional use permit. That's the technical term for it.
Yeah.
So as long as you're a C, as long as,
I know the conditional use, I did the process before, I went through, I just want to see if you get a difference between that and then the cannabis specific for cannabis, that's all. It's the same thing?
Yes.
You have to go and do the same process and, you know.
yeah.
Yeah,
And I
same
will
thing.
just say, in some
right.
towns, in addition to this, they have created a specific map for cannabis. So then you'd have to be the correct zoning designation, like conditional, also within that cannabis map.
Okay, what about Boston?
Boston did not do that. Somerville did that. A couple of other places did that, where they're like, we want all our cannabis in this area, and it's green, and you know you can be there, but then you still have to go through the community process and the conditional process. Anybody else have questions? Do we have any that are from the, any of the questions on your list from online?
There was just one other question, which is why are project manufacturers limited to the purchase of 2,000 pounds a year?
Only for micro business. So if you're a micro business, you know, I don't know the specific logic behind the 2,000 number, but I presume it's tied in some respect to the canopy limitation. So a micro cultivator can have up to 5,000 square feet of canopy, and so the commission probably analogized that level of canopy as to how much product you could purchase on the wholesale market if you just start doing product manufacturing. But again, it's only for the micro business. If you're a general product manufacturing license, there's no limitation. You can purchase as much trim on the wholesale market as you can find.
The micro business, what's the difference? I want to make sure I understand the micro thing because I don't understand it. Can you explain what the micro business is? Difference between operator or
it's micro business is essentially a small scale cultivation and production operation. It's kind of like you'd think of like a craft brewery only for cannabis. So they're limited in the size. They're probably in a smaller building, and they also can deliver to consumers.
And do they have limited? I know the fees are lower, and are there limitations on, like you said, canopy and manufacture? Are there other aspects of that people should know? For example, how does it count toward your license types?
Yes, there is, although I haven't worked with them in a while, so I forget.
I can answer my own question.
Yeah, you can't have additional license types beyond the micro business license type. So if you're a micro, that's your license.
Which I think is really important for people to understand. So if you had aspirations on a retail and you're like, oh, I'll do a small cultivation micro business, that you can't.
No, you'd have to convert your micro business to a regular cultivator license and product manufacturing license, and then you could add the retail license. Because as April pointed out, and I failed to mention earlier, there's a license limitation of 3 licenses per license type generally across all, except for the delivery operators, which are limited to 2, and they don't apply to your retail cap, and the micro business, which is limited to 1.
So if you want micro, make sure you only want micro, although there is a process to convert, so
ultimately,
you can do it.
You could start micro, and and we often see, frankly, on these grow facilities that they sort of phase in their cultivation facility, so they start small anyway. So you could theoretically start small as a micro cultivator and move forward, but you'd be better served to just go with the tier 1 cultivator license if you know you have aspirations of doing retail.
I saw another hand.
As a micro cultivator, could you also get the deliver operator license and kind of fuel your own alongside wholesale?
Well, you could get the delivery endorsement, which is essentially the same thing, because you're already a grower, so you would just deliver your own product.
Okay.
My question is for the micro business license. You said there's like a limitation for 2,000 pounds per year for wholesale, transactions. I was just curious, does that apply to like whole plant fresh frozen if you're processing for concentrates, or is that dried cured flowers?
It's a dry weight equivalent.
All right, cool, thank you.
Yeah, and just to sort of expound on your question, how onerous is the delivery endorsement? It's not like you have to go through the whole process again. It's just sort of an add-on to your license. Is it just a fee and?
Yeah, it's a fee and an additional inspections. The commission will come back out and make sure that you qualify for the delivery.
Anybody else have questions? Yes.
So the difference between micro business and retailers is like retailers do what you guys do basically, right? and micro businesses are like almost like your sons. Like they come in and they'll sell weed for you and stuff, right? No? Okay.
Nah.
There's no such thing as a micro retailer. So there's a retailer is a dispensary, but there's a micro grow. So just think of it as a tiny cultivation, like craft beer. You know, there's Budweiser, and then there's like Treehouse. Is that a thing? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it is, right? Isn't it like a big
Treehouse
beer?
isn't so micro anymore.
Not anymore, but it used to. It used to be. It
Yeah.
used to be, but then they get bought up, right? But so think of it as like a craft cultivator, and so there's that for cultivating and for manufacturing. So if you're making edibles or vapes or anything like, so you're buying wholesale product from a cultivator, and then you're turning it into your goods. Those are the only two micro categories that exist. Anyone else? Okay, there was one question that I wanted to answer online, and then I think we will. If I'm a general, okay, I think we answered it. All right, I think we have answered a lot of questions. I encourage you all to stick around. We'll be here. I just want to go over some housekeeping things for the next 2 days of the seminar. So tomorrow is a big day. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. we have the legislative history and the social justice in the cannabis industry, and that will be presented by Commissioner Camargo from the CCC. So she will be here 10 to 11:30 presenting on that. It's super fascinating, the legislative history. I mean, granted, I'm an attorney, so I'm geek out on these things, but it's just really interesting to see how we got to this place and where we've been. So she'll be here, like I said, 10 to 11:30. And then 11:30 to 1 is the real estate session. And that is probably, especially if you're talking about retail, the most important part of this. It's where the bulk of your initial capital will have to be sort of expended, and just so many considerations go into real estate beyond the local licensing process. And then we'll have the break. Tomorrow we also hope to have completed our Canfessional exhibit. If you noticed when you came in, there is an installation at the bottom of the stairs. We are asking people who are interested in helping us sort of abolish stigma around cannabis to engage with this interactive exhibit. If you step inside, it's an immersive exhibit, and you will be prompted to share your experience in cannabis, either your first time, meaning the first time you engaged with cannabis, first time you got high, first time you saw it, first time you ate it, any of those fun things. Your reaction to the space, either our seed dispensary or the Social Justice Cannabis Museum, and finally, why you cannabis. So what cannabis does for you, how it helps you, how it has impacted your life in any way. So we're really excited about that new feature of our museum, and we really hope to be able to share that with you guys tomorrow during the break. And then the afternoon session will be corporate structure. Also super important, how you form your business. It's almost like where you start, and there are a lot of things to consider: capital, who your partners are, who you're involved in, tax implications, which is a very interesting and difficult field to navigate in the cannabis space. So that's tomorrow, and then on Thursday we have another packed day of sessions, and I just want everybody to remember on Thursday we have a guided tour of the museum at 2:30. The Boston Globe will be here, and then also we have a mixer from 3:30 to 6-ish, whatever. The dispensary's open till 8, so mixer starts at 3:30. We'll have food and music and all that good stuff, and it'll be a really good chance for you to network, to speak to us, to speak to other people in the industry that are at different points, and that's probably the most beneficial thing you can do if you're trying to get into this space, is just talk to people, get to know people, and find alignment. So thank you guys so much for coming. We appreciate it. We'll see you tomorrow.